Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to Caron's first Tips and Tricks webinar of 2015. My name is Chrissy. I'm the account manager here for our Okanagan office. In a few moments, I will be turning the mic over to our presenter, Alan McLennan, who will take the next hour to show you some tips and tricks of Sage 300. Alan has worked with Sage for Sage and Sage-related products for over 29 years. He works in our Vancouver office as account executive and has been with Caron for almost 5 years. Alan will be conducting the presentation today in the most current version of Sage 300 ERP, version 2014, but most of these tools are available in Sage-supported versions. If you can't seem to find anything that we've shown you today, please feel free to contact us after the webinar. We can go through that step with you. After the presentation, we'll be doing a question and answer period. However, if you have any questions throughout the seminar, please feel free to use the chat icon in your control panel to the right. You're also welcome to use this if you have any issues with audio or with looking at the screen. So please feel free to contact me directly via that way. And I will now pass you on to Alan to go over the Sage 300 ERP tips and tricks.
Thanks, Chrissy. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great.
And can you see my screen?
I can definitely see your beautiful blue screen.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to jump right into it. We've got lots of material to cover. Some of the stuff we're going to cover today is relatively basic, and some of it is requires a little bit more technical skill. And so without any further ado, we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to start off just with accessing Sage 300. So I'm going to go ahead and log into the application and talk a little bit about a change that Sage has made in the way that the product is licensed. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my sample company, Inc. This is an American-based sample company in US dollars, not particularly relevant, but I'll be using a couple of different companies. One of the main changes that Sage has made in recent editions, as I said, relates to licensing. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a second instance of Sage 300 ERP. And this time I'm going to log into Sample Company Limited, my Canadian sample company, and go ahead and click OK. And the change that Sage has made relates to the user licenses. If I click on the current users, you'll see that the administrator is only using one license. Even though I have two different companies open, I've logged into the application twice, I'm now only consuming one license. In previous versions of the product, if I logged in twice, I was actually using two different licenses. So now you have the ability to essentially open as many different companies as you wish, without consuming all of your land pack licenses. So that's a significant change or improvement in the license management of the application. Now, when I have these companies open, it can be confusing to tell which one is which. I have to basically look at the bar at the top quite closely, and when I have Sample Company Inc. and Sample Company Limited, it can be a bit confusing. So Sage has made another change that allows me to distinguish more easily between companies. I'm going to go to my start list and all programs. We'll go to Sage and to Sage 300 ERP and into the database setup. Now, this is an area that's restricted to the administrative user. So I'm going to log in as the administrator. And what Sage has done is given us the ability to assign colors to companies so we can distinguish them. So I'm going to select Sample Company Inc. I'm going to go to Edit. And I'm going to choose Color and then select a color. So we'll make this a nice bright green so it stands out, and click OK and OK. And we'll take Sample Company Limited and we'll edit that and we'll select a color for that. And you'll see you can choose any color that you want. We'll make that a nice bright blue and click OK. So we'll exit from here and we'll launch Sage 300 again. We'll log into Sample Company Inc. or Limited, whichever one pops up here first. So we'll log into Limited, and just let me start another instance here. And this time I'll log into Inc. Let's let me minimize these, and you'll see that I now have my color. So I'm much more able to distinguish between the companies when I'm working with those companies on the screen. So it makes it much easier for me to distinguish between those multiple companies now that I have them open. So that's just a quick tip on in terms of how to work with multiple companies. So I'm going to work now and show you a few shortcuts. There are all kinds of shortcuts available in Sage 300, dozens and dozens of them. We're not going to focus on all the keyboard shortcuts today. We're going to look at some of the other more functional shortcuts. So I'm going to start off with a small shortcut in the general ledger that makes it easier to do some reporting. So I'm going to go into the GL transactions and into my batch list. Now, one of the things that can happen with batches, of course, is that we can have an error in a batch. And if we have a look at batch number 196, this is a batch that I deleted a credit, posted the batch, so the batch was out of balance. And, of course, it produced an error in that batch. And, of course, we create a new error batch. But how do I quickly and easily find out what that error is? Well, I can go into the reporting section, into the GL reports, and I can print the posting journal and ask for the error report. What we have the ability to do now with Sage is simply to come to this batch on my batch list, double-click on the error, and I can print my posting journals and posting errors from here. So there's no need now to go to the GL reports to run a posting journal. It can be done directly from the batch list. So a little shortcut that will save you a little bit of time in terms of accessing the reporting in the system. We're going to look at now some streamlined processing. One of the things about the product in previous versions or back-a-ways was that there was no real ability to have sort of an online or real-time processing of subledgers to the general ledger. Well, that's changed in the application. Inside of each subledger, regardless of what it is, payables, receivables, inventory, etc., there's a GL integration option. And this allows us to now post transactions in the subledger and in the general ledger. So we've always had the ability to choose when we send transactions through to the general ledger. Now we have the option to determine what happens when they get to the general ledger. So we've always been able to add to an existing batch or create an existing batch. But now we also have the ability to create and post a new batch. So when I post a batch of transactions in accounts payable, it's going to create a batch in general ledger and post it. So if you're one person working in the accounting system, there's no need to create the batch, then go to GL and print it and post it. Again, you can now do it all in one step. So you get close to real-time processing or real-time transactions right through to the general ledger. So a little tip to make things a little bit easier in terms of processing. Not everyone uses inventory control, but I want to show you a little trick in the inventory control system as well. And this will speed up data entry in purchase orders and in order entry. In the inventory items and price list, Sage introduced a new feature called manufacturer's items. So we have our own item number, we have a vendor item number, we can have a customer item number, and we have a manufacturer's item. So the number by the company that ultimately made this item. Not everyone uses this, but we can actually use it to create a shortcut for accessing systems or items in our finders. If we have a look at our finder and we have a look at our fluorescent desk lamp, I've created a number of different manufacturers' items here. One of them is lamp, and I've created fluorescent desk lamp. Let's go back there and let's select halogen desk lamp. And what I'm going to do is create a manufacturer's item number for this one, and I'm going to call it lamp as well, and we'll call it the halogen desk lamp. And we'll go ahead and save that. And I'm going to close out of here, and I'm going to pop into order entry for a moment. We'll go into our OE transactions and into our order entry. We'll start an order with a customer number. And the traditional way of accessing an item is to come down here and click in our Finder, and then we can go to the description and we can search for lamp. Now that we have used the manufacturer's item, all I have to do is type lamp into the item number field and hit the Enter key, and it will populate my field based on that manufacturer's item number. So you can use that manufacturer's item number for what it was intended, just to store the item number for the manufacturer, and everyone could be unique. Or you can use it as a shortcut for your Finder to group items together so that you can quickly find the items that you want to view. So it's a handy little feature, a nice little shortcut just in terms of accessing items quickly through the Finder in the order entry in the purchase order module. Moving along, we're going to talk about a change in the fiscal calendar. So we'll jump up to our common services area. We'll go in and have a look at the fiscal calendar. And this is something that will be important to you at month end and year end. In previous versions of the product, older versions of the product, we had the ability, obviously, to lock fiscal periods. But when we lock them for the entire company, all modules. Sage has now introduced the ability to actually lock periods by module. So I can choose to leave my general ledger open while locking my payables and receivables at month end. So no transactions get posted back into December when I'm working in January, but I can still keep the general ledger open so that I can finish off my month end. So this is a useful procedure, a useful tool for period end and year end to make sure that I can lock down my GL so the transactions don't get processed in the wrong period, but still continue to work efficiently. Now, inside of Sage, as I mentioned, there are all kinds of keyboard shortcuts. And we're not going to go through all of those today, but what we have done is we've prepared a card. And this is a little card that you can keep by your keyboard, and it will outline all of the keyboard shortcuts that you can use to navigate throughout the system. So next week, after the webinar is over and we've had a bit of a break for the weekend, we'll send this out to you. Now, it is possible in Sage 300 to work through almost any screen without using your mouse, if you wish to. So we'll send that card out. We're not going to go through all those keyboard shortcuts today because there are about 25 of them. So moving along from those shortcut options, we're going to talk a little bit about personalizing Sage 300 as well. So I'm going to go back to the root menu, and one of the things we can do is tailor the application for our own use, so it's a little bit more efficient for us to use. We have this menu, of course, on the left that we can use to find items, invoice entry and accounts payable, invoice entry and accounts receivable. But we also have the ability to create our own menu system inside of Sage 300. By right-clicking on the desktop, I have the ability to add a new folder. So I'm going to create a new folder and call it Daily Activities. And finish. And I now have a folder on my desktop. There's nothing in it currently, but there are a number of ways of actually putting information into this folder or features into this folder. Let's start by going into accounts receivable, and we'll go into the AP transactions. Now, if I'm doing AP and AR transactions, obviously I need invoice entry. So I'll highlight that, I'll right-click on it, and copy it. Now I can go to my Daily Activities folder, and I can paste. So now I have the ability to launch my accounts payable invoice entry from inside of my custom folder. Now, we'll go to accounts receivable, and we'll do the same thing. I'll take invoice entry, and we'll copy that. We'll go to Daily Activities, and we'll paste that. Now, clearly, I have a potential problem because they're both called invoice entry, and I don't know which one is which. So by right-clicking on any icon inside of the application, whether it's one I've created or one that exists in the system, I can look at the properties for an application, and one of the things I can do is change the description. So we'll go ahead and call this one AP Invoice Entry, and we'll apply that, and my screen is changed automatically. So I can rename any application inside of the system, including the ones that are originally there, and I can also change the icon on any function that's in the system as well. We would suggest that you limit this because it does make support a little bit more difficult if all the icons and all the names have changed. But if that does happen, you do have the ability to right-click, and you can restore defaults on an icon and put it back to the way it was. Now, I want to show you one other area that's available in the properties, and this is a good little tool that you should consider, and it's Start Multiple Companies. When I select that option and start invoice entry, I'm going to launch my AP invoice entry. I can also double-click on it again, and I can actually launch a second instance of it. So I actually have two instances of AP invoice entry running. This is really useful if I'm doing something like purchase orders or order entry. I'm in the middle of an order for a customer and a rush order comes in. I don't want to have to cancel my order and enter a new one. I can actually just open another instance of order entry, create another order or another batch in AP or another batch in AR, and process both of them with the screens open. So that function here, the Start Multiple Copies, there's really no downside to that. You're not using any additional licenses, but it gives you the functionality to have multiple screens open. I may want to inquire on a previous order while I'm entering one. So a very useful function. Just a quick point here, the Start Finder First and All Users are grayed out. This is functionality that's not currently available in Sage 300. So if it's grayed out on your screen, don't worry about it. It's something that will come in future versions. So a couple of little shortcuts there to make it easier to access information. Now, we also have the ability to add other things to our folders. So one of the things that I can do is link to reports. So I can create a report. I'll call it Sample Report. And if I've created a custom Crystal report, I simply go out and browse for that report. I'll just quickly go into pick a report in my Sage 300. We'll just go in and pick up an accounts payable report just so we have something to link to, and finish, and we link to a report. So any Crystal report can be accessed simply from here, and it's going to launch that print routine, and I can now print that report. So again, not just applications or data entry screens, any of the existing reports can be copied or any custom reports can be added. I also have the ability to run outside applications inside of Sage 300. So if I work in Sage 300 all of the time and I want it to be my daily desktop, I can add applications like Word. So all I have to do is give it a title. I'm going to go out and browse. I'm going to go into my computer, into my program files x86, Microsoft Office, Office 14, and way down at the bottom, I have WinWord, which is the executable for Word. I'm going to finish that, and Word is now on my desktop. It picks up the icon automatically from Word. When I double-click on that, Word now launches directly from inside of Sage 300. So I can, if I don't have a single-click taskbar at the bottom, I can add whatever I need inside of Sage 300 so that I don't have to go outside or leave the application to get at other areas. Now, this folder that I've created, I've put it right at Sample Company Inc. I could have just as easily put it inside of Accounts Payable and added additional functionality inside of AP. There is one special folder that's available to us. I'm going to right-click and create another one. And this one I'm going to call Startup. And the Startup folder, again, nothing in it, but what I can do is take functions and add to that Startup folder. I'm going to take Order Entry and copy it. And we'll go to our Startup folder, and we're going to paste it there. And startup does exactly what it sounds like it's going to do. So I'm going to exit from Sage 300. I'm going to log in again. And as admin. And what startup does is it automatically launches whatever is in that startup folder. So if I spend the bulk of my time in order entry, that's my job, I can have the order entry screen launch automatically for me every time I start Sage 300. This can also be useful if you have a series of reports that you want run every morning. Put them inside of your startup folder and have those reports launch automatically for you. So an efficient tool for launching an activity every day. Now, I'm going to be in and out of the product, so I'm going to get rid of this startup folder so that it doesn't launch every time I start the product. So just let me get rid of that. So I want to talk now, we've seen a couple of shortcuts there, a way we can personalize the product. I want to talk a little bit about personalizing the Finder. You're all familiar with the Finder. We're going to go into Accounts Payable Vendors. And of course, we can access the Finder by clicking on the little magnifying glass or pressing the F5 key on our keyboard. Now, with the Finder is just like a data entry grid in invoice entry or order entry or purchase order entry. I have the ability to realign the fields simply by dragging and dropping them. I can hide fields by right-clicking and hiding them if I don't need them, so that I can tailor this Finder to include the information I want. Now, sometimes there's information that I want to search for that's not here. So what I have the ability to do is go up to the settings and go to the columns area. This will show me the fields that are currently in my Finder, and on the left I have all of the remaining fields in my accounts payable that aren't in the Finder. And this includes things like optional fields. So if I set up vendor class as an optional field and I want to include that in my Finder, I simply select it, include it, and click OK, and that field's now been added to my Finder. And I can, of course, place that wherever I wish. So you can tailor the Finder to include whatever fields you want to have or not. I removed that field address line 4 by hiding it. I also can go and exclude fields. So if I don't want them included in my Finder, I'll tailor it for my own uses. A couple of other quick things that we have the ability to do. One of the key things, or very useful things, when I'm writing a Crystal report or if I'm working in intelligence, those tools use the field names in the database rather than nice descriptions like city and country and phone number. Inside of my Finder, I can click on field number as column heading, and that will show me the actual field names that are used in the database. So when I'm writing a report, this is a very quick and easy way for me to see what the actual field number is and the data that's represented there, so that when I'm creating my report or editing my report, I can see what it is. There's also a couple of other quick things we can do here. One is we can highlight some information. So I can change the text color on a field. I can do that. I can change the background. Let's give it a green and click OK, and click OK. And I can highlight a field. So if I want one particular field to stand out, I have the ability to do that. Another thing that we can do with our Finder is set criteria. I've got some criteria set, so I'm going to clear everything right now and save it and click OK. And you'll see I have a list of all of my vendors here. Now, sometimes I'm working in an area and I only want to see particular records. I only work in the California area, so I only want to see customers that are in California. So here we have our state province. Let's drag that over here next to this. And let's go ahead and filter this information or set criteria so that we're only working with or seeing vendors in a particular state. So I can go to set criteria. I choose the column I want to filter on. So we're going to do state and province. I'm going to add that as a header. And then I set my criteria. So in here, I can say I only want to see California, CA. And I'll go ahead and save that and click OK, and my data is automatically filtered. Now when I do this, each time I access my filter, the filter is going to remember, or the finder is going to remember the criteria that I've saved for it. Now I can be a little bit more sophisticated with my filter. I have and or conditions. So I can say I want it to be California or Texas, and click OK and filter. And so I can be selective. I'm not restricted to a single set of criteria. The other thing that I can do, let's clear these, and we'll clear all of them for the moment. I'm going to say I want Texas. Click OK. We'll save. We'll filter that. And now I want to filter it a little bit further. I only want to see customers that are in Houston. So I did an OR condition, Texas or California. I can do an AND condition. So I'm going to go ahead and select city and add it. And my AND conditions work across. So in here, I'm going to set this to Houston and click OK. And we'll save that and filter it. And we now only have Houston. So the criteria in here allows me to narrow down my selection so that I'm only getting the information that I need. I don't have to scroll through hundreds and hundreds of records to find the values that I want. These finder settings are unique to each finder. So the colors, the layout, the criteria, I've set those for AP vendors. AP or AR customers still have the default values. So you can set them for each and every finder in the system. Will remember that. While we're on vendors, let's talk a little bit about importing and exporting data, because this is something that a lot of people do. So on virtually every screen inside of Sage 300, we have a file option. And on that file option, we have the ability to import and export data. So if I'm working on AP vendors and I choose export, I'm exporting vendors. If I am in vendor groups and I choose export, I'm exporting vendor groups. So let's go ahead and look at how this works. So I'm going to choose export. I have some choices, statistics, comments. I want my basic vendor information, so I'll click OK. And now I have to tell it what format I want to send it out in. Lots of options. We're going to work with Excel. I give it a name so I can browse. I'm just going to place mine on my desktop and call it vendors. And now I choose the data that I want to export. And when I export vendors, because I have optional fields turned on in this database, I will have those fields as well. Now, when we look at this, you'll see, just like in our Finder, there's a huge number of fields that exist in the accounts payable vendor file. If I want to export for the purposes of updating email addresses, I certainly don't need all of this information. Now I can go one at a time, and I can turn them off, and I can use my arrow key and my space bar and toggle them. What's better is if I take the header, I right-click on it, and I can unselect or select all fields. So we want to choose only our email address. So we're going to scroll down, and we're going to pick our email address. It's down here a ways. Now I want to go back to the top, because you'll notice that the vendor number has a red star. That indicates that that's a required field. It's a key field. It's how Sage 300 identifies this record. So we always have to have the vendor number selected, or we'll run into a problem. Now, with the vendor optional fields, I really don't need any of that information if I'm just updating my email address. So I'm going to unselect all of those fields, and if we expand it, nothing selected. These are required fields, but only if I'm exporting the optional fields. So we're fine with that. Now, if I'm going to be exporting information over and over again, obviously I can come in and select this information each time, but that's a bit of work. The other thing I can do, of course, is set criteria. So if I only want to see a certain range of customers or vendors, I can build criteria in the same way that I did with my Finder. Once I've done that, I can save a script. And I'm going to give this a name called Vendor Export and save it. And what that does is it saves the information that I've used to create this export. We're going to go ahead and export, and it's exported 33 records. Now, if I were to export again, let's go to Export, Vendor. You'll see everything is still tabbed through this. Everything is selected again. So if I want to do the same type of export I did before, what I do is I load the script that I saved. So I'm going to load Vendor Export, open that up, and it's done my selections for me. All I have to do is simply click OK. So it's a very quick way. If there's a routine export that you need to do often, save a script. Each time you do it, load that script and click OK, and your export is done. So let's have a look at that export file. So it's on my desktop. So we'll just open it up in Excel. Oops, I should open that. Open with, I guess maybe I didn't export it as an Excel file. I thought I did, but just quickly, it should have defaulted to Excel for me, but it hasn't. Just let me quickly export that again. I just want to make sure that I've got the right format. Excel 2000. We'll load our script. Vendor export. I know what I'm doing wrong. You're probably trying to tell me to click on vendors instead of vendor export, which is, of course, the Excel file. So here's our file, and we're missing some email addresses here. So what I'm going to do is just update this to say 1400@gmail.com, and I'm going to save that. Okay? So now we've made a change. We want to import this information back into Sage 300. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to choose Import, my vendors. I pick my file, and essentially that's all I have to do. Now I have an option here. I can insert new records. So if I added a new vendor in that file, I can insert them. I can do an update only, which means it won't add any new vendors. Or I can do insert and update. So if I've made any changes, it will update those. If I've added any new vendors, it will do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what it's done is it's updated one record and processed 33 others. So if I have, or 33 in total. If I have a look at vendor 1400, it's now updated that email address to 1400@gmail.com. So the import-export functionality inside of Sage 300 is very important, or a very useful tool, not only for looking at transactions and analyzing information, but also for doing quick updates. If I have to update everyone's email address, it's a bit of a hassle to flip through them one at a time and update it and save it. It's much easier to do a file export, add the email addresses in Excel, and then import the information back in. While we're talking about export, there's also another area that involves Excel, or can involve Excel, and may be useful in terms of updating information. Sage 300 has the ability to use macros. They're not used as much anymore. A lot of people opt for simple customizations, but there are a number of macros that are provided with the product. There is one, and it's not shown here, but if I go out to my local disk and into Sage 300 ERP and into macros, there's a list of the macros that are available, and there's one here called budget. This is probably the most useful of the macros that are provided with Sage 300. And of course, what I've done is in my GL accounts, I've added a shortcut by right-clicking and going to New and Program to my budget macro. So I'm going to launch this and show you how a macro can be used with Excel to extract and put information back into Sage 300. So I'm going to retrieve a budget. I'm going to, because I'm working in Excel, I need access to my database. I'm going to tell it I'm working with Sam Inc. and today's date. And I'm going to tell it I want to retrieve my budget for year 2020, and I want all of my accounts, income and expense accounts, that I'm building a budget for. So it's going to extract that information through the business logic in Sage 300, and it's going to populate this Excel spreadsheet for me with my budget figures. And they're going to be organized by account and by year and period. So I have 2012, period 1, and my accounts. So here's my budget for period 1. It's $300,000. What I have the ability to do now is just work down this column and update the budget. So I'm going to make the budget $200,000. When I've updated my budget, what I do is choose Export Budget, which is actually importing the budget back into Sage 300. I'll tell it what year I want to update. I'm going to update 2020. The macro is done. So when I go into Sage 300 and into my budget maintenance, and I have a look at account 4,000 for year 2020, my budget has been updated to 200,000. So that budget macro that is provided with your product is available. It's a very useful tool. If you've used this budgeting tool before, you know that it's a bit of a hassle. You work one account at a time, you update, you save, you go to the next account. So the budgeting tool, it gives you a little bit of an example of how a macro can be used to work with a Microsoft Office product to extract information, update it, and send it back into Sage 300 ERP. So I want to show you another shortcut that Sage has introduced into the product, something that's new in the last two versions of the product, and that's something called the visual process flow. And visual process flows are designed to make life easier for a data entry person or for anyone using Sage 300 ERP. If we have a look at the visual process flow for accounts payable, what this attempts to do is lay out my activities for the day so that I don't have to hunt and peck through the menu. So if I want to do vendor transactions, I go into my AP transactions, into invoice entry. If I want to print a batch list, then I have to go to my transaction reports. What this does is it groups everything onto one screen. If I want to enter a vendor invoice, I simply click on the icon, and it's going to launch my vendor invoice screen. If I want to print my batch list, I click on that, and it's going to launch my batch list for me. Now, the nice thing about the visual process flows is that all of these visual process flows, and there are a number of them here, are editable. So by selecting the top level, right-clicking on my AP transaction, I have the ability to go in and customize this workflow. So everyone in the organization can actually have a separate workflow. I'm just going to move a few things out of the way. And what I have the ability to do is essentially include whatever information I want. So right now I'm entering vendor invoices. I could enter customer invoices here as well. So basically what I do is I have a link to a function. I can choose what I want to look at, an ERP function. I want to look at accounts receivable, and I want to do invoice entry. And that will update that function from AR2100 or AP2100 to AR2100. I change the title, and I can do both on the same screen. And I can personalize this by doing things like adding logos. I'll add our Karen logo and drag it onto the screen. When I have made all the changes that I want, I'll go ahead and save this. I can't overwrite the existing ones that are there, but I can go ahead and save as, and I'll call it My AP, and save that, and then I can close. Now, when I do that, it hasn't appeared on my screen, on my visual process screen, because what I have to do now is actually assign that for use. So as the administrator, one of the things I have the ability to do is assign visual process flows. So I can determine who has access to what flows. So I can go into the user Alan. Here are the standard flows that come with the product. Down at the bottom are the custom ones, and I can assign my AP to that user so that they'll have access to that screen. Now, I want to show you a custom screen, visual process flow that we used for one of our new customers. I'm going to log in as Chrissy. And this customer is actually located in the Cayman Islands. I haven't yet had a chance to, I have not assigned the visual process flow. Actually, I removed the visual process flow. So I'm not going to be able to show you what I wanted to show you. Let me log in as Alan instead, because I had a nice screen with a beach on it. But let me log in and show you the visual process flow that I modified for Alan. There's my AP, the only one he has access to. And there's the Karen logo at the bottom. Okay? So this visual process flow, I can do whatever I want. I can access Word through here, just like I did on the desktop. I can access accounts payable and accounts receivable. I can access web pages, whatever I want. I also have the ability to hide my menu so that when I log in, this is all I see. So if I only work in order entry or I only work in accounts payable, rather than hunting and pecking through a menu on the left-hand side, I can have a visual process flow that outlines everything that I need to do for the day, and that gives me everything that I need to work with. So a very useful tool, added in recent versions of the product, not used nearly enough by customers yet, but very efficient, particularly if you're bringing on new users and it's hard for them to navigate through here. Visual process flows are easy to create. All the tools are there. We can certainly walk you through designing one. So now now that we've done some of these customizations or personalizations, I should say, we've changed the Finder, we've added folders, we've added visual process flows. How do we actually transfer that from one user to another? Well, one way is to log in as Christy, make all the changes, log in as Alan, make all the changes, log in as Carla, make all the changes. That's a bit of a hassle. So there is a backdoor way to do this. If we go out to our desktop here, we'll go into our Sage 300 ERP data. And in here, wherever your data is located, there's a folder called User. If I go into Chrissy, there's 3 files here. This one controls my access to applications, what I can see. This one controls any customizations that I've made with the C. The last one with the P controls all of my printer settings. So if I want Carla to have the same settings as Chrissy, I can take these and I can copy them. I'll go back to the user Carla. I'll paste them in here. I'll just overwrite the ones that are already there. And I've now given Carla the exact same layout that I gave to Chrissy. So I don't have to go and log in as each user in order to do that. Now, of course, there is a better mousetrap, an easier way to do that rather than going out into the folders inside of Windows and copying files. There's some productivity tools that are available now for the application. There's a package of tools from Tyrox called Tyrox Productivity Tools. And this tool set contains a number of different functions that make life easier inside of Sage 300 ERP. I'm going to go into the setup and data repair area first, and the first one we'll look at is user management. Now, user management allows me to do inside of Sage 300 just what I had to go out into Windows to do. So I can go into user management. I can select my user, Chrissy. I don't have Carla set up. She's just existing out in the Windows world. So I can choose Alan, and then I can choose what I want to copy across. My security permissions, the process flows I created, and I can copy that information. So we'll go ahead and do that, and it's taking Chrissy's profile and applying it to my profile. So I can copy a user. I also have the ability to remove a user. So if someone is no longer with the company and I want to make sure they're gone from Sage 300, I can use this tool and remove them. And I can also remove all users. So if I've got a test company set up and I don't want any users in it, I can remove them. So some useful tools. Another useful thing is to find out what people actually have access to. So there's a permission report. I can load that, and I'll load it for everything. And it's going to run through this instance of Sage 300, and it's going to tell me who has access to what functions. So if you're a public company, you may need to report on this for SOX compliance, who has access to what functionality in the system. This report can be exported out to Excel, so you have a record of who has access to what applications inside of Sage 300. I want to talk about a couple of other of the tools that are available in here. Very quickly, accounting status. This is a very useful tool at period end or year end. It's going to look at my Sage 300 ERP company, and it's going to tell me what's going on. So right now in my general ledger, I have 19 open batches. One is ready to post. I have an open batch in accounts payable. I have 13 incomplete orders in order entry. So if I'm getting ready to do month end, of course, I can't have open batches, unposted batches in my system. This is a quick snapshot to tell me what I need to get done in order to complete my month end or my year end. So a very quick and useful tool. One keystroke, and I know exactly what's going on in my company. I'm going to look at, very quickly, extended application functions. And there are extended functions across a whole range of applications here. We're going to look very quickly at two of them. We're going to look at the extended GL accounts. Now, what extended GL accounts does is it gives me the ability to copy accounts very quickly. So I'm going to take 9991 100. And this is my general office expense account. If we have a look at this, I've got a 100 and a 200. I don't have anything else. Actually, let me take an account that I'm going to take this one where I don't have any department. So if I want to add a department to this account, I can come in here and I can type 100 and I can save it. Now, if I'm adding department 300 and I need to have that set up all over through all my accounts, I don't want to have to go through them one at a time. So what Extend GL Accounts does is it gives me this copy account function down at the bottom, and I now can select the accounts that I want to copy. So let's take that, let's take 9100, one that doesn't have a value. I can choose to narrow down the list. I can also choose a particular counter division. And then I can choose what I want to change. So I can change, let's say, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take an account where I've got a 100 and change it to a 200 if I've got one handy here. It doesn't matter. We'll just go ahead with this. And I'm going to change from blank, from 100 to 200 for this account. Make it 9100. We'll load this. Okay, so it's going to take this account. I can choose to include it or not, and I can go ahead and copy it. Now, the neat thing about this is I can do this not just in one company, but every company in my database. So very quick way of adding new accounts. If I added a new administrative account, a new expense account, I want that added across 3 or 4 companies, I can do that at one time. I can have it in Sample Company Inc. and Sample Company Limited. I can go ahead and process that. I do have to provide my administrator password, and I've gone through and now added those accounts. Okay? So a very quick and efficient tool in terms of going through and adding new accounts through one general ledger or multiple general ledgers at the same time. Very useful if you have multiple companies. I want to touch on one more quick extended order entry tool, just to give you a flavor of what's in the productivity tools. And this adds additional functionality to the order entry. Now, typically when we're doing order entry, if we want to do an item lookup, we can come down to the item and I could type in LAMP like I did before, or I can use my finder and I can find the item that I want. What the order entry extended functionality does is make it easier for me to add lines. I don't have to come down in here and click and add a line. I can simply go to my item finder, which is a new button that's added to the screen, pick the item I want, and it inserts it automatically for me. So I don't have to tab through any items. I just simply keep clicking on my item finder. I add the ones I want, and it's going to populate my screen for me. So a much faster way of building your order entry screen than the traditional method. The other thing we have the ability to do is to order from history. So by clicking on this button, I can go ahead and let's load the orders for this customer from the past. And you'll see that I have items here or orders that are in the system for this customer. And I can choose whether or not I want to reorder these items. So if I take this item and toggle it to yes, I can now order that. And it's going to, wait, now, what did I do? Maybe I didn't. Let's toggle it to yes. Order it. I'm not doing, oh, this might be something I've done wrong here. I'm picking an order that is not complete probably. We'll go ahead and order this, and you'll see it's added the order detail for me. So I can look at the existing history for a customer, and I can pick and choose the items and have it populate the order history for me. The other thing that I have the ability to do is once I post this, if I want to produce a purchase order from this, in the standard Sage 300 functionality, I go to Purchase Orders, and I choose the Generate POs from Orders function. The extended order entry functionality allows me to create a purchase order directly from here. So I can click on this button. I can choose to use vendor item information. I can choose to include whether I want items in a PO. I can create a purchase order, and it will create purchase order number 35 for me. So directly from the order entry screen, I have the ability to produce our purchase order. Very efficient way of creating my POs, much easier than going into the PO module and using the criteria and the selection routine to try to find an order to generate a purchase order for. So that's just a little sampling of the tools that are available in that productivity tool pack. They're across all modules. There's periodic processing functions here, things like deleting and completing purchase orders and orders, doing data repairs, things like fixing item valuation errors in inventory control. So a very useful and inexpensive little tool pack. I want to finish up this session with one other tool that's become available for Sage 300 that Sage has introduced in the last year and a half. And this is an alerts and workflow tool. And I'm going to launch the product. I can launch it from inside of Sage 300 or outside. And I'm going to log in to the Event Manager. And what Sage Alerts and Workflow allows me to do is monitor my database, to look for things in my database, and to provide notifications and act on those changes in my database. Out of the box, there are alerts provided for most modules inside of Sage 300. We'll have a look at accounts receivable. And what we have here are query definitions and events. Events are things that I'm monitoring. So, for instance, invoices due today, invoices due in the next 7 days, customers with a high balance, overdue invoices more than or within 90 days. Now, what I do essentially is I create a query into my database, and I then execute or build events around that. So let's have a look at the event for due today. We'll just have a quick look. So what I do is I build this event definition. And the event definition allows me to do a lot of things. Sage Alerts and Workflow has access to Crystal, just like Sage does. So I have the ability to add reports in here. And I can have those reports actually filed on my server, or I can attach them as emails. So if I'm sending in a notice to a customer about a past due invoice, I can actually send the invoice along with it. I have the ability to send emails. If I have access to a fax server, I can send out a fax. I can create a web page and put it on my intranet so that my customers have, or sorry, my salespeople have access to it. I can also do a webcast so that I can proactively send information out to my salespeople. I can even link to instant messaging. So if I have instant messaging addresses for my customer, I can contact them that way. I can build a list of subscribers. I'm going to send it to my subscriber, but I also in here can send it, in this case, to my customer email. And I have the ability to schedule this. So if I'm tracking overdue invoices or invoices due today, I may want this to run every day at 9 o'clock. So I can schedule that. The system will handle this automatically. Every day it's going to go out and send an invoice or send a notice about past due invoices. I'm just going to, what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and we're going to run this. So I'm going to right-click on this. We won't use the scheduler. We don't want to wait till tomorrow morning, and I'm going to schedule this event to run now. And it's been scheduled to run, and I happen to know that there are overdue invoices for Ronald Black. And I just happen to have an email account or Gmail account set up for Ronald Black. And if we wait for a second, in a moment we'll see an invoice come through. So here's an invoice that's come from Sample Company Limited, saying your sample company invoice is due today. Here are the invoice numbers, the amounts, the due dates, and a bit of additional information. I can customize that email message to say whatever I wish. I can, of course, include the original invoice. I can send this to my customers, or I could just simply send it internally to my salespeople so that they contact the customer, or I can do both. I even have routines where I can exclude particular customers. So there's a great deal of functionality that we can do with this tool, and it allows us to basically create any type of alert we want to monitor anything in our database. It could be something like a change of address. It could be an inventory shortage. It could be purchase orders on back order. One of the nice things about this is that the product doesn't just integrate with Sage 300 ERP, it also integrates with Sage CRM. So if I've sent that message out to Ronald Black about his past due invoice, I can also file that against his customer record in Sage CRM so that I have full integrated tracking from Sage and Alerts and Workflow to Sage 300 ERP to Sage CRM. So complete tracking of all of the transactions and all of the communications that I've had with that customer through to the CRM product. So Sage Alerts and a Workflow was introduced about a year and a half ago. We've done some really interesting things with this product for some customers with it, and it's a very powerful tool and, again, an inexpensive tool that allows you to monitor what's going on in your database and keep on top of things in your database. Essentially, what I've done here is use it as a collection tool. So we're pretty much at the 1 hour mark. That's been a flying tour of some of the tips and tricks that are available inside of Sage 300. So I'm going to turn the presentation back to Chrissy, and she's going to ask for questions and provide a little bit more information on some of the tools we've talked about today. Over to you, Chrissy.
Thanks, Alan. All right, so we'd like to open it up for questions now. I did have a couple come through on the chat, so I'll address those, or I'll have Alan, you address those first. The first one is, in the budget import, can you put it to future years, or does it have to be just changing to the current year?
No, it can be any year at all. So when I ran that utility, well, let's go back there. I don't think I still have it open. I do still have it open. So when I do export budget here, I just put in whatever year I want. So if it's 2021, I put in 2021 and it'll update that year for me.
Perfect. Okay, the second question we had, I think, was answered after the question came through, but I will address it anyway, just in case. The question was, when you rename, when you make your custom folders and you make rename changes and start multiple copies, will that change everyone or just yours, user?
Yeah, it only affects the current user that's logged in, unless I use that the user management area, and I copy the settings, or I go out to the Windows folder and I make that copy. But in here, this is if I change the UI, the printer settings, the UI profiles. Let's go to copy instead. If I copy the UI profiles, the printer settings, the desktop folders, maps, reports, and programs, then I'm moving it to another user. But when I do it on the screen, that folder for instance, for daily activities only exists on the user. When I log in as Alan, it's not there.
Okay. Can everybody hear Alan okay? That was a bit choppy for me. Was that anybody else? Can you hear me okay, Alan?
Yes. Did you need me to repeat that?
Yeah, you're still a little choppy. Hold on one second. It might just be me.
I'll try again. The answer was basically when I add anything to the desktop, it's added only for the user that I'm logged in as. So this folder, daily activities that I created, it only exists on the user admin folder unless I go out and I copy those 3 files that I copied before to another user, or I use that user management function and I copy those settings through to another user. So any customization that I do to the screen is unique to this customer or to this user.
Perfect. So that actually kind of rolls into the next question. I'm actually skipping forward a question, but the question was, does this copy their rights or only their setup, or is it rights and their setup?
Well, you see, the first one is copy security permissions. If I do that, it copies those as well. So I can choose whether I want to copy the rights.
Okay. I think everybody's having trouble with hearing you, Alan. You're quite choppy with your audio. Are you on web or phone?
I'm on the phone. I can quickly hang up and dial back in.
Please, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I'll just continue on with the question here. The next question is, once you make changes in the Finder, so when Alan was going through the Finder section, once you make changes, you move columns, you change the colors, will that stay each time after that? And the answer to that is yes, it will. Once you've made those changes, it is only user specific, but it will stay from that point forward. Hopefully. Oh, there we go.
I'm back. Is that better?
That's much better, yes. So I was just answering the next question. Once you make changes in the Finder, will it stay for each time after that when you move columns around and make color changes in the Finder area? And I was just answering that, yes, it will save those changes going forward for that user, correct?
Right. The only exception to that is the criteria, where I narrowed it down by state and city. I have to save that criteria. If I don't save the criteria, it won't remember that. But everything else, the colors and moving the fields around and hiding fields, it will remember all of that.
Perfect. That's all the questions that I had come in. I'm going to unmute everybody. Is there any other questions out there that anybody has regarding the presentation today? Was anybody there? Alan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, please feel free to contact either, here I'll just show my screen again, contact Alan or myself anytime after the webinar, and we can answer any further questions. Also, if you have any questions regarding the alerts and workflow or the Tyrox productivity tools, we can definitely answer any questions you may have on those as well. Alerts and workflows, the basic one connection that you saw starts at $17.99, and the productivity tools, you can buy them per module at $5.95, or you can get all the modules in a bundle for $11.95. So if you did want to talk further about what they can do and how it might help your organization, please feel free to give Alan and I a call. Alan, thank you very much for a great presentation. I hope everyone was able to take something from today's session and make their lives a little bit easier. As Alan mentioned, we're going to be sending out, mailing out the keyboard shortcuts probably next week. So I think we have most people's addresses. If not, Joan will be in contact with you to get your address so we can get that off to you so you can start utilizing the keys strokes. We also want to do some more webinars in the future, so we'd really appreciate any feedback you may have. We will be sending out an email with a little short survey. Shouldn't take you too long. If you could just let us know, what we can do to improve, any specific areas that you'd like to focus on for the next webinars, and we can make this a regular thing for everyone. That's all we have today, so thanks everyone for joining us. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Bye.